Welcome to the Small Business Sessions podcast from Enterprise Nation's Business Connected training program and our partners Vodafone Business, Constant Contact, Dropbox and JP Morgan. In this week's episode, I'm joined by mixed media visual artist Christian Azolan. After a work contract ended due to the coronavirus pandemic, he began creating digital illustrations. That hobby soon turned into a business as Christian used the downtime during lockdown to create a brand for selling his limited edition artwork online. Since then, Christian has had several successful exhibitions and achieved a significant amount of press coverage for his brilliant artwork. In today's episode, we discuss how artists can commercialise their work, Christian's advice for making media headlines, and how being part of Enterprise Nation has boosted his business. Let's get started. So, Christian, thank you so much for joining us on the Small Business Sessions.
Well, thank you for having me.
Really looking forward to hearing your story. So, take me back. You're an artist,
Yep.
but how did it all happen? It was a lockdown moment for you, wasn't it? That's where it all began. Do you want
It
to
was
tell
a
me about that?
lockdown moment, and I think when we talk about lockdown now, it's something that's already happened naturally. But I think what we forget was how scary that was around that time, and that people were just falling ill around us and dying. And I know a lot of people. Also, when they were going through lockdown, some people found themselves and some people didn't. Some people were just lost because they couldn't do their job and they couldn't run their business and they couldn't do the things that they wanted to do. So I know lockdown is either a positive experience for some people or a really negative experience and a really awful nightmare. So for me, starting my business then, that was scary. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know why I was starting this business. I just knew I wanted to be an artist, and that's something I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I think I took a pause during lockdown. And I said to myself, what is it I want to do? And I was working in marketing beforehand. I was teaching and lecturing. I was doing other jobs. But then I kind of thought, if this is it, which sounds a bit dramatic now, what do I want to do for the rest of my days? And I thought, actually, I don't want to work in marketing. I don't want to work for somebody else. I don't want to work for a shareholder or a manager. I want to work for myself. And I want to be creative every day. And I want to make art. So that's why I kind of started it.
So were you doing art before that? Were you like doing it on the side, but obviously
I wasn't really doing art. I trained as a designer. So when I went to university and I got my BA, I was a fashion designer. So design, yes, kind of links to art, yes. But I guess design has a real purpose in everyone's life. So therefore, I knew how to illustrate. I knew how to draw. I knew how to have creative ideas, which was really great. But I think when you do art, because it's something that's so subjective and there is no end client that you're really thinking of, you're just making stuff that you like and it's very emotive and very personal to you. So you just kind of hope other people like it. And I started it because my friend saw my work online and she messaged me during lockdown and she was like, you should sell some of this stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, I've never really thought about that. I thought, actually, I could sell some of this stuff and it could just be a side thing while I do other work. And then it just kind of rolled on from there.
Before we get into, the details how you've grown that, do you want to tell us about your art? What kind of art do you do?
I guess in terms of, because I've only been doing it for 4 years, I guess my type of art is very experimental. It's very much playing with different mediums and playing with different things. So I do illustrative art, which is what I was doing during lockdown. And the reason I did that is because I had an iPad and my partner bought me an Apple Pencil. And because of lockdown, I couldn't go out to the shops and buy paints and products and canvases and things like that. So I just started working digitally. And then, so I do digital art. And then as lockdown kind of eased off and I got my own studio, I then decided to go and get paints and canvases. And then I started painting. And then I started doing collage work and I started learning how to gild, which was really interesting, which is the application of gold on artwork. So I was just literally experimenting and seeing where I was going to end up. And I enjoy gilding, I enjoy painting, I enjoy collage and mixed media. So I think I like to create a series of work, but I like it all to be themed. So if it's digital artwork, I do a lot of digital artwork. If it's painting, I'll do a lot of paintings. If it's mixed media or collage, I'll do a lot of those as well. So it's very mixed.
Brilliant. Let's go back to those lockdown times. So once you decided, right, I'm going to do this, and your friend had said you need to sell this.
Yeah.
What did you do? How did you go about trying to make money from it?
Well, I think at first I was just selling to friends and family,
right?
Because that was my only audience at the time.
Yeah.
And then what I was really thinking about was, how do I turn this into a business? What do I have to do? What are the stages? So I just started researching everywhere online for advice, finding out how other artists do it, what's important for starting a business, the real basic stuff. And when I started my business, I knew nothing about business and profit margins or registering it, trademarks, really simple things that now I know. But back then when you're starting a business, you just have no idea how important those things are. And funding as well, you know, all those types of things. So that's when I started researching. And I wanted to research then as much as possible about running a small business, an artist running a business, where I can sell my goods, where I could advertise, where I could market my work, and then just started going from there. And that's when I discovered Enterprise Nation, because I was just looking online. I was like, I need an accountant. How do I get an accountant? Because that seems really important.
Yeah.
Paying tax is a real thing.
Yeah,
you know, those
it is,
kinds of things.
unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, it was just kind of figuring out, how do you run a small business? What are the things that you really need to know? Because I obviously knew as an artist I could create. I knew I could make work, but I didn't know how to actually make profitable work and work out my margins and my profit margins and being in the, you know, in the black and all those things. I kind of had to figure that out myself. And that's been like, it's an ongoing journey because things change all the time. But that's where I started, just researching and using Enterprise Nation as a resource. And then you realize when you're looking for the resource is great, but actually what's really important is the other people that you speak to who may be at a different stage of their business. You can speak to those who have just started as well. And then you can also speak to those who may have been doing it for a couple of years and they can give you some advice and things. Or you can speak to people who are doing it for so long that they just know everyone, everything, and they have that network that you can kind of tap into. So therefore, that's what I was trying to do, tap into how to create a business, how to manage a business day to day. And because it's only me, how you put on different hats for different days to do different things. So even though I would love to sit there and create artwork Monday to Friday, I know on Friday I've got to kind of sort out my receipts, and I know like I've got tax return coming up soon, and the website needs to be updated, and I've got to apply for a show, I've got to apply to an open call, and those things you kind of have to realize and plan really, really carefully in your diary, because it'd be great to just sit there and make art all day, but I can't do that. That's not a business. No. It's the numbers that makes the business.
You've got to make money. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. The fact you brought up Enterprise Nation now onto that, I mean, you are a brilliant example of someone that's like made the most of the network. Like you came to it for advice. Yeah. But lots of people may know you from the site because you've been featured in all sorts of things. Absolutely. And you're now on the podcast. Yeah. So I guess, would that be something you'd say to people, is if you find a network, look for how you can like use it to your advantage?
Absolutely. I use Enterprise Nation because it's free, and that's really important to a small business. I use it because there's a whole network of people who are on there that I can speak to or ask for guidance and go to events. I've been to some of the live events and things like that. And then you meet people face to face, because part of your business is kind of networking and understanding and tapping into different people for different things that you may need. And what's really nice is I haven't met an awful member on there. I haven't met anybody that I've kind of asked a question or met face to face who said, oh no, I can't tell you that, or that's a secret, or you know, I don't share that. Everyone's been really open and really caring and sharing information, because you succeeding doesn't take away from their success, and vice versa. So therefore, everyone's trying to help each other and empower each other, which I think is really, really great.
That is really good to hear. That is so good, which is exactly what we aim for. Back to you selling your art, you know, it's a stereotype. It's often true. Artists are not natural salespeople. You know, like you say, you just want to do the creative stuff, but when it comes to sell it, it's a bit awkward. Yeah. So where have you sold it? Have you made use of like online marketplaces and that? Yeah. Is that a way you've
when
sold
I first started, I was searching for an audience, so I did the Amazon program that was running on Enterprise Nation, which was really great. And then as I start to find my audience, I moved away from that kind of online world. I've been selling more face to face. I've also decided to set up my own shows. And I've also taken part in group shows. I do pop-up events. I reach out to retailers who may want to do something maybe internationally or locally. So I think it's really, when you created the work, and artists are very good at creating the work, but it's this element of, well, what do I do with it now? And where does it go? And you want to sell it, because when you sell it, that gives you more money to make more artwork. So as lovely as it is to have all this artwork around you, isn't it nicer on somebody else's home, which on their wall, which I still find it a bit weird that someone wants to put something on their wall that I've created. That never goes away, by the way.
That's good though. That shows that it's still, you know, having an impact on you as well as the person.
And then you have other artworks who work in much larger mediums and much larger artworks. And sometimes you've got to think, that's great if it goes in the gallery, but you know, we live in London, and if you're from London, you know people's houses are not that big. You know, a majority of people's houses are quite small. So you creating a canvas which is 5 meters by 4 meters may be absolutely beautiful and the best work you've ever done. But the chance of somebody coming along and buying that, you know, you get one of those, two of those, you know, in a year. So I make work that's compact. I make it as standardized sizes because most people will buy my work and put it in their own frame to put it in their house. So I try to make sure it's accessible to people as possible. Because I go, as an artist, I go and buy other artwork as well. And there's so many artworks I haven't bought because I live in a flat and I've got nowhere to put it. And I think, oh, I would really love that, but they don't make a smaller version, or there isn't a print, so I can get an accessible version into it. So I make original artwork. I also have smaller artworks that I make the prints from, so people can buy it and put it on their walls. You know, they may not be able to afford an original, which is like £3,000 to £4,000, but they can afford a £50-60 print. And then they may over time learn who I am, what I do. And maybe one day in the future, they may buy an original artwork or not. It doesn't matter. But I try to make my artwork as accessible to people as possible, but always from my vision of what I want to do. So I don't make artwork for other people and thinking about the buyer who's going to buy it. I think about what I want to make and then making it accessible to other people.
That's such a good point about like a standard frame size, because you're right, that is quite annoying. You love that painting, but it's a really weird size.
Yeah,
I just want to buy a frame from a normal shop, but it's not, you know.
Absolutely.
And yeah, that is such a good point.
Yeah, because really most people might, you know, they may love the artwork and pay for 60, 70 quid, but if you're going to get it properly framed, it may cost you 120, 150 pounds if it's a random size. But most people probably go to IKEA and get a black frame and make sure that it's A4, A3 or A2. Yeah. And that'll be it. That's the most they're going to think about it. I would love for every single person who buys my print to be like, I'm going to go to the framers and spend £300 on framing. But, you know, that's the reality of that is not as big. And don't get me wrong, there are people who do that. You know, they want the most expensive glass and they want the most expensive material, or they want this really special wood from somewhere because it reminded them of some place that they visited like a long time ago. Everyone has their own intentions and different reason. My job is to create an accessible product that people can enjoy day to day while looking at it.
And I guess amongst some people, there's a perception about art that it's not for me. I don't have art on my walls, you know. So that's I guess, part of it as well, isn't it? About the accessibility.
There is this element of people not really understanding art. And I think what I say to people is, because a lot of my friends, when they buy art, they come to me and they go, I've got like a space in the kitchen or I'm redecorating a room. What art should I get? And my answer is always, art that you like. You have to look at it every single day, not me. So therefore make sure you buy something that when you enjoy looking at it on your wall, it makes you really happy, it cheers you up. And sometimes you don't have to understand it. It doesn't have to be a lot of abstract work. They're really beautiful just to look at, or just to create a mood or a feeling, or if it makes you feel calm or it makes you excited or it makes you feel a little bit naughty, whatever the art can do, that's what you've got to kind of put on your wall. So I always say to them, just buy the art that you like. It doesn't have to be my art. Just go out there and have a look and have a price in mind, because I think sometimes people think art is super expensive as well. And then, you know, obviously it will be if you're buying a painting, but it may not be if you're buying a print. And there are loads of print fairs, especially in London and all sorts of different places across the UK, where you can go to these small accessible shows and buy. Usually the general rule is the smaller the artwork, the more cheaper that it usually is.
Yeah, really good point. You mentioned that you put on your own shows, which is, you know, an amazing way to reach. So how have you gone about that? You know, have you, in terms of staging them, the marketing, and what tips would you give to other artists for that?
I put on my own shows because there's an element of control. When you do a group show, your work is on a wall with other people, and that's great. But when I do a series of work, I do a body of work, and one series may contain 20, 30 pieces. What I do is I think, where would I like to show it? How would I like it to be displayed in the place, in the room? And I did a solo show in Fitzrovia Chapel. And Fitzrovia Chapel is this really ornate chapel in London. And it's all gold, and it's beautiful, and it's really old, and it's really small, and it's really unique. And there's a sense of calm in there. And I created a body of work called The Little Black Girls, which I put in there. And that was really important for me to make sure that it was in the right place, and it worked, and it made sense to people who were going to visit it, not only to look at the artwork, but look at the building and kind of understand that. The other thing I made sure that I do was market it in advance. So when I did like 3 or 4 pieces, had them complete, I photographed them, went to the chapel, took some pictures in there, knowing I hadn't finished the rest of the series, but I would use that for the promotion and the build up. And then the other thing that I did, which was quite scary, was I hadn't finished the series, but I booked the date in advance, forcing me, knowing that was it. If you're not done by then, you're either going to show 3 pieces of artwork or you're going to show 20. So kind of book in advance, plan in advance, stick to a budget of what you want to spend on it, I mean, I spend a lot of money on that one because the series took me 2.5 years to do. So, and I really wanted it to kind of look and feel right. So that was really important to me, to have that kind of single vision. So promoting it, marketing it. Make sure you tell your friends and family about it. I think sometimes artists do stuff in isolation. They might do a little show, but they don't invite people that they know around them. And a lot of people just want to know, what are you doing? How are you doing it? Especially if you're doing something creative. Make sure that the invite list is done correctly using things like Eventbrite, making sure I knew the amount of number that people that were coming to do, knowing how long the show was going to be on for, working out my costings and making sure I knew exactly how much this is going to cost me to the penny and how much money I had to make selling the original and the prints, making it available to people and promoting it on my own social channels as well as my email list, and making sure all those things kind of literally working towards this date of this 2-day show that I did. And that's the advice I would give to people. And I think not everybody and not every artist is ready to put on a solo show, but you are ready to go to a Cara boot fair, or you are ready to go and do a little group show somewhere. You are ready to do an open call to somewhere where you can start building that relationship of showing and displaying your work and allowing customers and buyers or collectors to see it. And that's the first stage. And most people would actually come up to you and say, oh, what's your artwork about? And then you know, and only you know the answer to that question.
Was it successful, that one?
It was really successful. We had like over 2,000 people attend across 2 days.
Amazing.
It was one of the biggest events that have ever happened in that space. But that wasn't just chance. There was a lot of planning behind the scenes of making sure that happens. So, you know, whenever you're having a show, you research and you realize 20% may not turn up. You know, things like that. You've got to make sure you know your numbers, who's turning up. Because if you know your numbers, who's coming in, you then have an idea of maybe a percentage who will buy and so forth.
Yeah. Another thing you've done is you've had a lot of media coverage, you know, as well as, you know, things using Enterprise Nation, but you've also been in, you know, newspapers and radio and TV. And so was that something you just intended to do? Or has that just happened because you've seen an opportunity and you've done it, you know, and what impact has that had on the business as well?
That was very considered. That took a lot of planning.
Right.
What I did was I sat down one day and I wrote down a list of all the newspapers, media coverage, and other artists, where they're being shown and where their work is being talked about. And I wrote a list of I wrote like the Evening Standard, the Times, the Guardian, you know, all those things. I wrote a list. And then I thought, how am I going to get into there? So what I did was I then go on and do the research and see where other artists are featured in those sections. So if you find an art and culture writer, for example, who writes about art and culture in the Guardian, for say as an example, then I know he writes about art. So I followed him on social media. I followed him on Twitter. That's where most journalists actually sit, or X now is now called. And what I do is I kind of go, oh, they're writing about stuff, and I follow them and I see what they're doing. And then one day they may have a call out. They may text and say, oh, I'm looking for artists who are based in London, or I'm looking for artists who use this particular medium, or are telling this particular story, or whatever it may be. And that's when you kind of go, oh, okay, I can apply for that. I can approach that. And then I talk about myself and who I am, what I do. And then maybe you get featured in that way. And if that doesn't work, you cross that out, you put a tick next to it, you think, okay, that didn't work, I'll go on to the next one. And that's what I did until I fulfilled all my kind of PR marketing things, was just making, you can't leave these things to chance. You know, there's no point you kind of doing stuff every day and working really hard in your business, and then some random journalist messages you from, I don't know, Horse and Hound magazine, let's say, as an example. Do you need to be in Horse and Hound? What's that going to do for you? You know, or do you want to be in the Times section on a Saturday in the arts culture section talking about how great your work is?
Big thanks to Vodafone Business for sponsoring this podcast. VHub from Vodafone Business has supported over 1 million SMEs, providing expert advice on a range of topics that matter to small business owners everywhere. Access VHub for a free one-to-one consultation with an expert advisor and get support tailored to your business. Book your free consultation with a VHub advisor today. Find more details at vodafone.co.uk/VHub. That is the exact advice I always give when people ask me, how do you do PR? Find the relevant journalists, follow them on social, and look and reply when relevant. So you've ticked all of the right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
and if you can afford it, go to a PR company.
Yeah.
And they'll do that for you if you can afford it. You know?
But you've shown it's
possible. I spent no money on it. I spent no money on any of the marketing
No.
I've ever done.
No.
At all.
No. So But have you been able to measure the impact of what has that had on your business? Have you noticed, like when you've been in the Evening
Yes.
Standard, did you then see kind of an
Absolutely.
uplift? So
Yeah.
it worked.
Yeah, I've had people who email me and message me if I do, like, I was in the metro, for example, and this lady messaged me, she's like, oh, I saw you work in the metro, it's really beautiful, and I want to order some prints. And she went onto my website and ordered like over $1,000's worth of prints.
Wow.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And that's just from that media coverage,
Yeah.
you know? And then, but you'll also get, what happens is sometimes when you do the media coverage, more media people are interested in what you do and they come to you for different things. So they may do a story on not necessarily your artwork, but maybe saying to you, you know, financially, how does it work being an artist? Or what are the struggles of being an artist? So there's different interests from other media organizations who want to figure out what you do and how you do. And it may not always be directly linked to your art, but it may be linked to your world in which you sit in and other people want to know.
Yeah, which is exactly what this interview is, isn't it? Around your story.
Absolutely.
That's such good tips, because I think a lot of people, I think, are a bit scared of journalists, you know, because, you know, we're most of us are nice people, not all of them.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? There is this perception of, oh, they're going to expose, you know, they're going to write a nasty story. But if you're emailing the arts editor of The Guardian,
Absolutely.
they're not looking to expose people,
Absolutely.
are they? Or, you know.
And also you've got to kind of think, just because a journalist comes up to you and asks for something, you don't have to take part.
Yeah.
You have every right to say, no, I don't want to be featured, or no, I don't want to talk about that. And no, I don't want to do that. You're always in control of your own narrative. So if you don't want to take part in something, just don't take part in something, you know?
Yeah. You say have you got your own studio? Is that something you've now got? So
Yes.
that's a point, you know, in an artist's journey. They've got their own studio. So how did you go about that? What's your advice for that kind of thing?
I'm in my third studio now.
Right.
And my advice finding a studio, and it's really, really tough to do this in London because property is really expensive. So most artists in London, East London, North London, South London, wherever they may be in London, they're usually in a space that's either been decommissioned from something old, it's listed, so developers don't want to pay to update it, then they just rent it out to artists. Figure out how much you can afford to pay for a studio, because a studio in London can cost you from free to £300 to £1,500 a month. And sometimes when you do the calculations, you think, okay, it depends on the space that I need. How much am I actually selling? Do I only need the studio for a certain amount of time? We have this idea of artists which have a studio all the time. Actually, if I'm just making work for 6 months, I only need a studio for 6 months. And a temporary space could be better for you.
Yeah.
So don't think you have to have it continually, because that's money coming out every single month. Work out what you're making to cover that and the reasons behind why you need a studio. I think simply having a studio because you just want to go and make art and be free to do that is great if you can afford to do that. But that's an outgoing. That's how I see it now in my business. It's an outgoing that I have to pay every month. So do I need it all the time, or do I need it just some of the time?
And you work with the WLSOA.
Yes.
I know that's. Do you want to explain what that is?
Yes.
And, you know how, because I've wrote down the initials and I can't remember what it stands for.
It's the West London Society of Art, and it's a CIC company, which means it's a community interest company. And there's two things about that. One, I'm the chairman, so I started it with a bunch of other directors, and I kind of run it. And that was started because I was moving out of my current studio. It's very difficult to park there. There's just a lot of issues. And I just thought to myself, I really need a studio. And in my area where I live in West London, there are no art studios, there are no art centres, there's just nothing. So I just thought, actually, maybe I should start a community interest company and not just help myself, but help other people. Because I know a lot of artists in that area, and they're all saying there's no art studios or anything like that. So I teamed up with a charity called Haifa. And what they do is they team up with companies who've got derelict buildings or buildings that are not being used, and they put artists in there for a certain amount of time. So I teamed up with them. They came in really handy in terms of finding the space, and they found the space literally like 5 minutes from my house. And this space used to be like an old Wetherspoons, so it's massive.
Oh wow, that must be. They're always massive.
They're always
Wetherspoons?
huge, yeah. And then we've got the upstairs as well.
Oh, wow.
And there was 24 separate studios upstairs, all sectioned off already with separate doors and locks. And then downstairs was just like a workshop space, and then we had an extra building which we turned into an art gallery. And why that's really important is because, yes, I get a free studio out of it, but every single person, all the other 23, 24 artists in there also get a free studio as part of that. So I'm now benefiting the community because local artists can apply and be in there. We now have our own gallery and our own workshop space, and that's everything that you need. And the reason I started the community interest company was really because I was tired of begging and asking other people for opportunities. I just thought, well, if I want a studio and I want a gallery and I want a workshop space, I should just go and get one and find a way of getting it, rather than thinking, oh, I've finished in this studio, I'm now going to go and get another studio or pay somebody else's rent or do whatever it needs to be. I just thought, I have this thing where I say, stop looking for a seat at the table, just build your own table. Like, stop looking for, just go and do it. And I thought to myself, well, what's stopping me from starting a community interest company? Nothing. So I wrote the proposal, started the business, and it's a non-profit. Every penny that we get goes back into the business. And what's nice is I'm supporting others and supporting others locally. And when you work as a community, you do more, you get more out of it. You get advice, you learn new things from other people who maybe have been an artist for 30, 40, 50 years, and you're always learning. So we've made sure we've got a range of people from a range of different backgrounds who do a range of different artist mediums locally, making value to being in this particular area.
Wow.
So it's just about being a go-getter and going to get it yourself.
I'm going to have to come. I love it. I'm from West London originally. Yeah. So that's
Absolutely.
amazing.
We're in Stockley Park, so come and have a look. It's a really nice area.
I'll come have a look. And I think you're a good example. That's another example of entrepreneurship becomes quite addictive, doesn't it?
Yes.
So, you said you would you moved into it. You wanted to do a business, and now you're like, I want to do something else. I'm going to start something else.
Absolutely.
I want to start another thing.
Yeah,
it does, doesn't it? It becomes quite a.
But that is, and to sound not really like promoty, that is the power of Enterprise Nation. Because if you say, oh, I want to start a company, what do I do? Oh, well, we'll tell you how to do it. I want to write a business plan. What do I do? I can show you how to write a business plan. So all those things are available. You've just got to want it and to do it. So I run my community interest company in the same way I would run any other company or how I run my art business. You still need to do your taxes. You just have access to funding, and you have to find where the funding is and how it works. And you can team up with other charities. Community interest companies can team up with other community interest companies. Again, it's that network of entering that world and saying, I can do this because I really want it. But at the same time, when you're running a company like that, it's who else am I benefiting? Who else is coming on the journey with me? My personal art business is my journey, while a community interest company is the local journey and how I'm making a difference back to people who live around me, who have the same issues and the same problems and may not have access to those things. So I think to myself, well, how can I help them do that? So that's what's so great about Enterprise. It's the resources that you get to say, oh, I want to do marketing online. How do I do that? There's an event for that. There's a program for that. There's a blog about that. There's something about that. Someone's talked about it somewhere along the way where you can get involved with it and learn the rules of how you do it, how to go about it. So even if next week I thought to myself, oh, I want to start a food business. Where would I start? I'd go on Enterprise Nation, like, oh, this person's run a food business.
I know the exact blog post I could send you for that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what it's about, isn't it?
So if you do, I'll send that to you.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what it's really about. Anything that you want to do from a business point of view, somewhere along the way, somebody on Enterprise Nation has done it and it's been recorded or is at an event or you can go and meet them. Yep. And that's what's really interesting. So I kind of had this feeling, if I want to start another business, I wouldn't be this idea of, well, where do I start? Yes, I'd research it online, but why not go to somebody who's already done it, who can tell you, and you can learn from maybe their pitfalls and where they went wrong, which is what happens so much in business, learning how to do it right, rather than learning from your own mistakes, because learning from your own mistakes is very costly and can be very expensive. And I should know, I've done it being an artist, but you learn from other people and you share that knowledge. And that's what it's really about. Because a lot of people sit there and they go, I just don't know where to start. And we'll start there and have a look, see what's going on.
Brilliant. Back to the work you're doing in West London and how you said, this charity finds derelict buildings, turns them into like art spaces. There's a lot of talk about the high street and so many vacant buildings. Yeah. Do you think that the positive of that is that landlords and building owners, have you found they're more open to, okay, use my old shop for a gallery temporarily? As you find that
they're forced to be more open.
Yeah.
I mean, the high street is just such a big conversation in itself. And the biggest thing I say to people say, oh, I wish there was like more stuff on the high street. Yeah, but you don't shop in the high street. You go and shop in Asda, or you go and shop at the local retail park. So stop talking about the high street because you don't use the high street. That's why it's changing. We want to have one. We want to drive past one as we head to Tesco or Asda or wherever we're going to buy our shop, but we don't stop and go to the local butchers or whatever that may be. So landlords have had to force themselves to think, how can I generate some money? Maybe I'm not going to get the 18-month, 2-year, 3-year contract, but maybe I can get a couple of little things if I do some pop-ups or allow other smaller businesses to come and be there for a week, a month, 3 months, or whatever it may be. And then they're kind of regenerating the high street and doing little small 1-day, 2-day weekend events. And that's kind of regenerating it in some way. But I think it's one of those things where we shop differently, we consume differently. And one of the reasons we use less of the high street, going back to the very beginning, was because of lockdown. We did everything online. And now people want to get out there and buy things and do things face to face. And that's great. But we need to use it if we want to keep it. And and it's not going to stay around if we don't use it.
There is, I'm from Bristol, and actually in Bristol, an old Marks and Spencer's closed 4 floors. And that is now called Sparks.
Right.
And it's been taken over by a charity, and it's full of artists and retailers. There's a circus based there.
Yeah.
And it's actually been quite successful.
Absolutely.
And it has,
Yeah.
But you're right, you need the forward thinking, that was a multitude of charities came together, and the council, and
absolutely. And that's what it takes. It takes multiple people around a table to say, this is what we should do, this is how we should do it, how can we change what's happening? Because this idea of same old, if that's not working, you've got to find a new way of thinking. I saw a really good example of that in Liverpool when I went to, and it was, again, a building that you can clearly see was used as something else, which was just one big business. It's closed down. I think there's about 30 artists in there, all with their little shop and their little stand. And they were just selling some really interesting products. And it was packed, it was full. I was there in summer. And it was just really lovely to see these people thinking, I can't afford a shop, but I can afford this little space here. And I can create my work and sell it directly to people. And I think that is really lovely.
Yeah, absolutely. You've mentioned it a couple of times, but funding, how have you taken any, for your own business, your art business, have you taken any external funding, or has it all been organic?
All being organic.
You've not taken a loan or a grant?
Yeah,
or anything?
I think that there's a reason for that. I don't like funding or giving away any part of my business, because with art, it's my name, and I want to fully own it. I don't want anybody else telling me what I should or shouldn't be doing. It's a very personal business. So therefore, every penny that I've put into it, my partner, who owns 50% of my business, who just like works in the background and does like my tax returns and stuff like that, because it's really important that he gets the numbers and he enjoys the numbers.
Oh, it's always find a person who enjoys numbers.
100%. Yeah. When I do an event and somebody hands me something called like a risk assessment, I hand that over to him and I say, great, let's figure that. You figure that out. Yep. I'll create the work that's going to be ready. And that's what, it's very personal. Yeah. So therefore, doing art is my name. I sign it. It's my artwork. Yeah. I don't want anybody involved who has a share or who's lent me money to feel that they have a stake in it. Right. I just don't like that, and I don't want to do that.
Right.
And also, it's a small micro art business. I'm not looking for to build like a retail shop and own 20 shops that all sell my artwork. That's not what I'm looking to do. So because it's small and micro, it belongs to me, it's mine. While the community interest company of running West London Society of Art, that is all about funding. That's one of the nice things about having that community. You can apply for funding from different organizations and different companies and there's always money somewhere around. Someone's willing to give to you and not have anything back into that because they just want to feel that they're doing something great, which is fantastic. So applying for funding, that is the core of that business. We've got a fundraiser coming up and all those things that are really important to put money into the business. That I have a personal connection in that way, but the personal connection comes from running the CIC and making sure there's money coming in and artists are benefiting from that. So by putting on art shows in our gallery, we've got an event tomorrow, we're going to King's Cross in a fair to sell work as a group. Those things are really important. So therefore, funding has to come into that. And I've got to look at a range of funding. Yeah. Ideally funding where they just give me the money and they don't need anything back. Other than a tick box saying, have you done this? Did you do this? Who's it going to? How are you spending your money? Here's a bunch of receipts. Fine. We've done it. That's what I like, that kind of funding. But again, I wouldn't want anybody to come in and give us a load of funding and tell us how to run it or what's important or what we should be doing. And that's not the vision.
So you don't think in your own business you'd ever take a load? You just see it on organic. No. You just see organic.
Yeah, because I'm making artworks that I just feel is really precious to me. It's really important, and I don't want any internal funding to pay back because there's no guarantee. It's subjective. I can make some artwork where I think, I've borrowed, I don't know, $3,000 or $5,000 or whatever it may be, and I'm going to make some artwork to go and sell at a show. And if nothing sells at the show, I've still got to pay back that funding, or I've still got to pay back that loan that I've taken because that obviously incurs interest. I run my business with the numbers. That's the only way I can do it to survive and carry on being an artist. If I wake up and think, I'm going to do this today because this is just what I want to do, that's not a business. That's a hobby. And that's great, but that's not a business. So I've got to look at every single number and it may sound a bit less creative, but which is why I have my partner who will, if I ignore some of the numbers sometimes, which I do, he will then come over and be like, no, we can't do that. That's too expensive. Yeah. Or, you can't use that framing because it's too expensive. Yeah. Or you really got to look at that or find an alternative because you need somebody who's going to say, you need to look at this. This is really important. Otherwise, you don't make any money. And that's really important as a business to make money.
Yeah, you do. Finding, like I said, I'm also not a numbers person. So my partner kind of looks after invoicing and taxes. And she seems to like it.
Yeah. Well, it's a beautiful support, isn't it? Sometimes running a business, you don't have to just run it by yourself.
Yeah.
Even though it's my business and it's my name.
Yeah.
Having the support around you, or even looking at your people that you know, who'll be like, oh, they're a sales manager. And maybe they can give me some tips on selling. Oh, I know somebody who works in a gallery. Oh, I know somebody who's really good at numbers. I know somebody who works at the Inland Revenue. There's people around you who do different things where you can benefit from. I think sometimes we're just scared to ask. And if it's just advice, that's their dances. I'd be like, yeah, do this.
Want to help, don't they? They feel, oh, I've contributed to this. I've
Absolutely.
See my friend doing well, or
exactly. They may hate your artwork, but they're happy to tell you how to use a spreadsheet.
There you go.
and make some money. Because that's what their skill is. So use that. There's people around you as well.
Perfect. Just finally, and you've given so much advice on this podcast, but if you had to give people had to take one thing away from your experience they could learn from, what would it be?
If you're in a job and you're doing your side hustle, this idea of jumping in and doing it full time is advice that everybody gives you when you run a side hustle. Oh, you should do it full time. Oh, you should do it full time. And sometimes you may feel that pressure to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to go and do it full time next week. Don't do that. Plan it out. Work out your numbers, do your projections. When are you ready to go full time? And how do you want to go full time? How are you going to support your business day to day and making sure there's money coming in every single day? What events are you going to do? Speak to other people who have gone it, who are about to make that jump, or they've just slightly made that jump, and learn from their experiences. And then the number one advice, which I would say to anybody, is from an artist's point of view, do what you want to do. Make sure you make artwork that you love and that you like. Then you'll find other people who will love it just as much as you do. But do your numbers. Without your numbers, you don't have a business. You just have a really fun hobby and it's amazing and you can do that every single day. But if you don't do your numbers or find somebody to support you and help you do your numbers, you don't have a business.
Brilliant way to end. Christian, thank you so much for joining us on the Small Business Sessions.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. You've been watching Enterprise Nation's Small Business Sessions podcast, powered by Business Connected and our partners Vodafone Business, Constant Contact, Dropbox, and JP Morgan. If you've been inspired during this episode, head to enterprisenation.com/business connected to register for webinars and to access free business training. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you next time.